Number 5 on this list is the Falling Boy. This is a sad legend that's probably true. The Black Church is located in the Romanian city of Brasov and is a beautiful old Gothic church. It almost never made it to 2022 though, because several hundred years ago it had a horrible fire. The church did manage to survive and had a bunch of renovations done on it to spruce it up. It's around this period of time that people think the Falling Boy statue was erected. On one single pillar of the exterior of the church, there's a statue of a boy who looks to be falling over. Either that or he's searching for something on the ground. It's difficult to say for sure. Either way, no one has any idea why this statue is here, and 3 legends have come out explaining it. Arena Webb writes, "Some say that he was the son of a priest and that he was naughty. As a punishment, his father sent him in the church's attic. But then the Great Fire started and so the boy got trapped in there. The statue was built depicting him trying to escape the flames." Another legend, and a more popular one, is that the boy was helping with the construction of the church. At one point, his boss told him to check if the wall is straight. He leaned over the walls and he fell. His boss felt guilty and ordered a statue. Others, though, say it was murder. They say that this boy was so good working at the construction of the church that a fellow worker got envious. He sent the boy to check the walls and he pushed him. The boy died, but the man couldn't live with the guilt, so he confessed shortly after. The other builders decided to make the statue in the boy's memory. So those are the 3 legends about the boy, and sadly all of them result in the boy's death. Now it's thought that his spirit still lingers here at this church, and if you're lucky, you may even be able to spot him. Comment down below what you guys think about this legend and which of the 3 stories you believe the most. Curious to know what you guys got. Number 4 on this list is the Pied Piper. You've most likely heard the name and probably the story of the Pied Piper before. If you haven't, then let me read off a great passage from Andre Diamond describing the tale. The Pied Piper legend originated in Hamelin, Germany during the Middle Ages. As the story goes, the town was struggling with a rat infestation problem and was desperate for relief. A mysterious man in pied clothing approached the mayor and promised he could rid the city of its problem in return for payment of 1,000 guilders. The mayor agreed, and the man played a magical pipe to lure all the city's rats to a nearby body of water where they drowned. When the piper returned for his reward, the mayor refused. As if visualizing a rat infestation was not traumatizing enough, the story then takes another sinister turn. Furious that he had been cheated, the piper soon returned to the town of Hamelin on St. John's and Paul's Day. As the grown members of the town attend church, the piper once again played his magical pipe through the streets, this time luring the town's 130 children from their homes. Depending on the version of the story, he either led them to the lake or into a cave, and none were ever seen again. Most versions agree there were a few children left behind. One was crippled and he could not keep up, one was deaf so he could not hear the music, and one was blind and could not see where the other children were going. When church let out, the survivors told the townspeople what had happened, and the rest is history. Now you're probably thinking, okay Nick, well what the hell does this have to do with Romania? Well, there's another version of this legend that says this man took the into Vagas Cave and then after a time slowly let them out. Vagas Cave is in Transylvania, and it's believed by the locals that this Pied Piper still lives there. They also think that this is the true version of the legend because there's a very large population of German-speaking Saxons in that area. These people are thought to be the descendants of the children who were taken so many years ago. Even to this day though, everyone still fears Vagas Cave and still fears the Piper. Number 3 on this list is the Sacrificial Lakes. Most of the time when somebody enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in the said. Most of the time when someone enters a body of water, they're worried about becoming food to the fish that live in said body of water. What they usually aren't as concerned with is becoming food to the actual water itself. That's exactly what some people in Romania believe in regards to some of their bigger lakes though. Lake Vinderel, for instance, is known to some locals as a lake which will actually swallow people up. Even the most skilled swimmers who go here will drown and never be heard from again. Most of the time these bodies are never found, but there's a legend that says a piece of bloody flesh floats on top of the water at all times. Lake Vinderel is one of the most famous, but it isn't the only lake in Romania that has some dark lore around it. One lake literally swallowed up an entire town when a slope collapsed and forced the homes along with a church inside the water. People around that area often hear the ringing of church bells as they pass by the lake, thinking that the spirits of those who died in this tragedy still haunt the area. Because of all this death in these Romanian lakes, it's now believed that sacrifices must be made to keep the water at bay. Yep, that's right guys, what better way to stop people from dying in the lakes than to have people specifically die from the lakes? That's the train of thought, and it's most prevalent in the Maramureș region of Romania amongst the elderly folk who live there. They think that the only way to calm the dark spirits who clearly inhabit these waters is to occasionally offer a human sacrifice. Now I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't able to find exact details on who has been sacrificed or when, but I imagine that this has taken place at least once in Romania's history if there's an entire legend around it. I also find it kind of interesting that the Romanians don't have a particular demon or creature in mind who could be behind this. As of right now, it's just thought that there's a dangerous entity in the lake water and that sacrificing a human should relax that entity, at least for a little while. Either way, if you're going to go swimming in Romania, then stay away from the lakes. Number 2 on this list is the World War II ghosts. There's a town called Bodmin Moor, and in that town there's a very specific mansion with some very interesting lore surrounding it. That mansion is called the Teleki Mansion. This mansion is really interesting because it didn't actually see much fighting at all, but is currently haunted with ghosts from World War II. The ghosts of these World War II soldiers who haunt this place sadly caused their tragic fate themselves. One evening, the soldiers went into the mansion and decided to enjoy a little bit too much wine. The mansion had cellars full of nice quality bottles, and the soldiers definitely overindulged. In fact, they got so hammered that they decided to start firing off their guns in the basement before passing out. They passed out in the cellar, and it's said that from the guns that they shot off, the wine started filling up the room. They were far too gone to notice and actually drowned in said wine. Now these soldiers haunt the mansion and locals see them regularly. In fact, some blurry photos were taken back in 2011 of these ghosts in the place. Dying is obviously worst case scenario and never what anyone wants, but I guess the one thing that you can say for these guys is that they probably died at least happy. Number 1 on this list is the nymphs of Cioclovina Cave. Deep in the mountains of Transylvania, through a long road of rivers and beautiful scenery, sits a forgotten cave called the Cioclovina Cave. This cave is full of crazy stuff from the past and has been a really important find for archaeologists studying Romanian history. Tombs, treasures, skeletal remains, and most important, potential evidence of nymphs are all found in this mysterious cavern. In case you aren't familiar with what a nymph is, then Britannica tells us that they were usually associated with fertile, growing things such as trees or with water. They were not immortal but were extremely long-lived and were on the whole kindly disposed toward men. These were women in Greek mythology who were considered divinities. It's believed that this cave may have once been the home to some of them. The treasure that's been found here, some of the inscriptions that are on the wall, the overall environment outside the cave, all of it fits the bill when it comes to a nymph. At the very least, if a nymph or a group of nymphs hadn't have lived here, then people definitely think this would have been a site of worship for them. Animal carcasses were found here as well, and it's believed that they would have been used for some sacrificial rituals to such higher beings. Now this cave is researched extensively, and locals think that it might possess some mysterious powers. Also, that the rivers that run around this area are rich with minerals and other healing properties. I suppose this urban legend isn't super scary, but honestly kinda cool. Then again, nymphs have been known to be dangerous in the past, so if there was one lurking around this cave still, you wouldn't want to get on its bad side.
In at number 5 we have Jim Morrison. Born James Douglas Morrison, he was a singer, songwriter and poet who served as the lead vocalist of the rock band The Doors. However, Morrison developed an alcohol dependency during the 60s, with him passing away unexpectedly at the age of 27 in Paris. As no autopsy was performed, the cause of his death remains unknown. He was ultimately laid to rest in the famous Père Lachaise cemetery. Over the years, his headstones were defaced or stolen until Morrison's own father placed a rather ordinary looking one on the site with an inscription in Greek, which reads, "Against his own demon." However, in 1997, journalist Brett Meisner was visiting the cemetery when he had this photo taken of him, standing in front of Jim Morrison's headstone. However, in the background of the picture, standing in the doorway of a crypt, you can clearly see a semi-transparent figure, arms held wide, which resembles the late singer. Many state that the pose is very reminiscent of a famous photo taken of Morrison. What do you guys think though? Ghost or trick of the light? Whatever you think, it's been enough to drive more tourists to the cemetery to attempt to catch a glimpse of the famous singer. In at number 4 we have Sweeney Todd. Now hear me out before we begin. Yes, I know that Sweeney Todd is said to hail from Victorian London, however this legend states that maybe he didn't, and maybe he walked the streets of France. First and foremost though, Sweeney Todd is a fictional character who appeared as the villain of the Victorian petty dreadful serial The String of Pearls. The tale became a staple of Victorian melodrama and London urban legend. A barber from Fleet Street, Sweeney Todd murders his customers with a straight razor and turns their bodies over to Mrs. Lovett, his partner in crime, who bakes their flesh into meat pies. However, could it be that the original Sweeney Todd was not from London but instead hailed from medieval Paris? Legend states that Paris had its very own demon barber during the 14th century and was perhaps the first home to the cannibalistic pastries from the murderous barber. During this time, the Rue de Marmoussettes was known far and wide for its succulent French delicacies, especially for those made by a butcher next door to a barbershop on the corner. The pies and pastries were said to be so tasty that even King Charles VI was said to have been a fan. From 1384 to 1387, the butcher was said to have been in cahoots with his neighbouring barber, with it being said that the pastries were so scrumptious thanks to the young flesh of the victims of the demon barber. The partnership was said to have thrived for 3 years and would have continued if their gory deeds weren't discovered. It was said that an abandoned dog was what gave them away, who was barking outside the door of the barber's. The police conducted a search and discovered heaps of humans' bones and flesh in the shed underbelly of the two shops. For their crimes, the barber and the butcher were burned alive, along with their shops, in order to exorcise the area from their evil. Coming in at number 3, the catacombs. The catacombs of Paris are underground ossuaries which hold the remains of more than 6 million people in a small part of a tunnel network built to consolidate Paris' ancient stone quarries. Now, it was largely forgotten until it became a novelty place for concerts and various other private events in the early 19th century, as well as a hotspot for urban explorers. Now, as you would expect, there are a ton of legends surrounding this creepy burial site, so I'll be listing off a handful. Let's start with the ghost of Philbert Espard. During the French Revolution, Philbert was a doorman at the Val de Grace Hotel. During a mission to fetch a liqueur from a cellar, Philbert wound up in the Paris catacombs instead, walking around in the darkness alone with just a single candle. He became lost and confused. His body was not found until 11 years later when a group of cataphiles uncovered it. His body is now buried in the catacombs in the exact spot that he was found. Legend now states that on each November 3rd, Philbert's ghost haunts the labyrinth of the catacombs. However, the most disturbing story hails from the 1990s when a group of cataphiles were walking through the catacombs and discovered a video camera on the ground. To their surprise, the camera held footage on it. While watching the footage, it became apparent that the man filming was lost and had no idea how to escape the winding tunnels. The video then ends abruptly with the man dropping the camera on the ground and running off into the unknown. He was never discovered. However, it was this legend that many believe As Above, So Below, the movie, was based off of. Coming in at number 2, we have The Phantom of the Opera. We're all familiar with the 1986 musical based on the book by Gaston Leroux, with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Its central plot revolves around a beautiful soprano, Christine Daae, who becomes the obsession of a mysterious, disfigured musical genius living in the subterranean labyrinth beneath the Paris Opera House. But did you know this story is actually based on legend, with many Parisians being all too familiar with the story of the Phantom and the mysterious box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House. This legend began at the Music Conservatory on Rue Les Pelletiers, where it is said that a young pianist and a young ballerina fell in love. Planning to be wed, the pianist composed a piece of music to symbolize their love that was intended to be played at their wedding. However, that never happened because on October 28, 1873, a fire destroyed the conservatory and killed many, including the ballerina. The pianist survived but was forever scarred by the fires, particularly on his face. He abandoned the world and took refuge in the underground passage of the Garnier Opera House in order to escape the dreadful people who considered him a monster or a demon. He stayed there for the rest of his life, devoting himself to his music. Now, the pianist was never disturbed, but rumors quickly began to spiral, creating the legend of the Phantom of the Opera. The first rumors came from the opera house staff, such as stagehands and dancers. It is also purported that box number 5 at the Garnier Opera House is said to be haunted by the mysterious Phantom and should always be left vacant for him. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Notre Dame and the Devil's Door. Notre Dame is one of the most infamous infamous places in French history, with it being a medieval Catholic cathedral that was consecrated to the Virgin Mary and is considered to be one of the finest examples of French Gothic architecture. However, popular interest in the cathedral blossomed after the publication of Victor Hugo's novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame back in 1831. The cathedral is holy ground, but saying that how many tourists from around the world have been ushered in by Satan himself. Some history first though. When it comes to the construction of buildings such as this one, construction always starts at the back of the building with the entrances added last. So when it came time to add the famous door to the cathedral, a man by the name of Mr. Biscornet, a young metalsmith, convinced the church to hire him. The job lasted months, with Biscornet slaving away in his workshop. However, when he finally finished, it was of course a masterpiece and blew the minds of Parisians. However, were the doors perhaps too good to be true? This all took place during the 1300s, when magic was believed and myths spread fast. So when people saw the door for the first time, they believed that Biscornet couldn't possibly have crafted it himself, and that instead he had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for the masterpiece. Stories quickly began to emerge of people claiming to have visited Biscornet during the creation, and found him unconscious on the floor with the project mysteriously completed. The rumours began to spread, with priests adding fuel to the fire by claiming that the door's locks refused to work until they were sprinkled with holy water. To top things off, not long after this, the artist died, with many speculating that in order to fulfill the contract, the devil had to claim Biscornet's soul. In at number 5, we have the Beast of Hackney Marshes. This legend dates back to 1981, when 4 kids were crossing the marshes on a winter's morning. It is said that they happened upon, I quote, a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. Naturally, people began to assume that this was some kind of hideous monster. It remained a legend going forward, but wasn't spotted again until 2012, when it was captured on camera. Helen Murray, a university student, was out for a stroll near the dense woodland area when she said she was stopped in her tracks by an unknown animal, which she stated was larger than a person and covered in shaggy black fur. I quote, I tried to stay calm as I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was or if it was even alive. I had my phone ready to call 999, then the creature moved. Somehow I managed to take a couple of pictures before I ran. I managed to get away but was scared half to death. Now, she didn't contact the police because she feared they wouldn't believe her. However, the story certainly revived memories of the unexplained sighting that occurred in 81. Officers have stated that they believe neither of these sightings were hoaxes, and that 2 bear carcasses had previously been found nearby in the River Lee, and to this day it remains a mystery how they even got there. So, were the bears killed by this creature? Were the bears the creature? We don't have bears in England, so... stumped. In at number 4, the Killer Pool in Epping Forest. Epping Forest is a 2,400 hectare area of ancient woodland between Epping in Essex and Forest Gate in Greater London. Over 100 lakes and ponds are found in the forest. However, there is only one that is referred to as the Killer or Suicide Pool. This legend grew rapidly in popularity after Irish author Elliot O'Donnell wrote about it in his book Haunted Britain, stating that there is a pool in Epping Forest that is home to unearthly presences, some miserable and some evil. Now, there is one story about the pool that goes as follows. Around 300 years ago, a couple engaged in a forbidden relationship, meeting secretly at the pond in the forest. However, the girl's father found out about the relationship, and in a fit of anger, he killed her at the pool. After learning about his girlfriend's death, the lover committed suicide at the very same spot. Following these tragic events, no birds were heard and no animals were ever seen in that area again. The water also became dank, and not dank in a good way, bad dank. On top of that, it is said that people with no inclination went on to commit suicide there, including a woman in 1887 and a young servant, Emma Morgan, who killed herself and her child. Jumping forward to 1959, a competition in a magazine was held to find the exact location of the pool. One writer claimed to know but refused to reveal the details, stating that the place was evil beyond measure. I quote, "The pool is deep in the heart of the forest, far from any road. It is dank, evil and malignant, with an atmosphere unpleasant beyond description. I doubt if the sunshine ever penetrates through the surrounding trees. If it did, it would never lighten the black waters." In at number 3, we have the Ghost of the Grey Lady and Longleat House. Longleat House is an English stately home and the seat of the Marquis of Bath. The house was originally built by Sir John Tyne and was designed mainly by Robert Smithson after Longleat Priory was destroyed by fire in 1567. It took almost 12 years to complete and is often regarded as one of the finest examples of Elizabethan architecture in Britain. Sounds magical, right? Well, it has a dark side, one of deceit and murder. It all began back in 1733, when Lady Louisa married Viscount Weymouth, who owned the Longleat estate. Louisa moved into the home with him, bringing with her a number of her own servants. It was said that she was fond fond of one of her footmen, who she described as loyal and true. Now, this favoritism wasn't taken well among the other servants, and out of jealousy they told Viscount Weymouth that the footman was having an affair with Louisa, which of course wasn't true. Now, this is where the story gets a little blurry. Some say Weymouth paid someone to push the footman down the stairs, while others say he did it himself. Either way, the footman broke his neck and his body was buried in the cellar. This took a toll on Lady Louisa, who developed pneumonia, which resulted in her death at the young age of 22. According to visitors of Longleat House, you can find a lady dressed in grey creeping along the house's corridors, especially close to the library where the footman died. Coming in at number 2, we have the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is a phantom cat purported to live in Cornwall, England. The creature is said to be panther-like and black-furred, with it stalking around Bodmin Moor killing livestock. Sightings of the beast were reported back in 1978 after mutilated slain livestock were found in the area. Some people proposed that the beast had escaped from a zoo, and as it was illegal to own one privately, the former owner could not report it to the police. It has been claimed that animal trainer Mary Chipperfield had released 3 pumas into the wild following the closure of her Plymouth Zoo in 1978, and perhaps this is what gave rise to rumours of the beast. Jumping forward to 1995, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food conducted an official investigation, with there being no verifiable evidence of exotic felines loose in Britain, and that instead the livestock could have been killed by indigenous species. However, less than a week after the government report, a boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull, measuring about 4 inches long by 7 inches wide. The skull was lacking its lower jaw, but possessed 3 sharp, prominent canines that suggest it may have been a leopard. It was immediately sent to the Natural History Museum in London for verification, with them determining that it was a genuine skull from a young male leopard. And finally, in at number 1, we have Spring-Heeled Jack. Originating from Victoria-era Britain, Spring-Heeled Jack is a character from urban legend that was first supposedly sighted back in 1837. However, over the years more frequent tales have emerged. His name is said to come from his ability to leap over great distances and heights. Not too shabby. The very first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack came in October of 1837, when a woman named Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill when a tall-coated man leapt from the building into the street. He then grabbed her with his metal claws and kissed her before tearing at her clothes. After her screams were heard, he fled the scene, leaping back into the building he came from. Following the encounter, more accounts occurred, with the most notable being the Alsop case. The Alsop case was one of the most widespread stories about Jack, with it being published in several newspapers. Jane Alsop recalls the moments when she was attacked, stating, "I answered the door of my father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, who told me to bring a light, claiming, 'We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane.' I brought the person a candle and noticed that he wore a large cloak. The moment I had handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth while his eyes resembled red balls of fire. She also reported that he wore a large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared tight-fitting, resembled white oilskin. No one was ever caught and identified as Spring-Heeled Jack, which of course led to numerous theories of his nature and identity. Skeptical investigators have dismissed these stories though and claim Spring-Heeled Jack is a product of mass hysteria, which developed around various stories of a boogeyman and devil.